Late last year, somehow, I got into the Dream SMP. As some of you might know, this is the equivalent of getting into Hannah Montana in 2018. But to catch up the unfamiliar, the Dream SMP was a survival multiplayer Minecraft server that ran roughly from mid-2020 to late 2022. Over time, its player base grew, and it began to develop a story, until there were nearly 40 individual streamers and creators whitelisted. Eventually, it became known as an expansive roleplay and setting, with lore spanning dozens of arcs and several side series. This isn't entirely a new thing, as some similar concepts were popular during Minecraft's original golden age in the early 2010s. If you remember the Yogscast Tekkit series or The Shadow of Israfel, you qualify for a senior citizens discount. And as a fan of Minecraft from back in that very golden age, it was really interesting to me to see how much had changed when it came to this sort of Minecraft roleplay, both the good and bad. As someone getting into Dream SMP well after the fact, there was a lot to sift through and a lot of conclusions to be drawn. While I did, I found examining the problems I encountered with the Dream SMP and their root causes to be immensely interesting. Ultimately, the thesis of this video is a dissection of what worked when it came to the Dream SMP storytelling and what didn't. It's always easier to criticize than compliment, so keep in mind that the Dream SMP was both popular and beloved for a reason. I'm going to be pretty critical in this video, but more in the way you would treat a draft a friend has asked you to look over, because I enjoyed the Dream SMP and wish it could have been better. Since this is about a series from several years ago, some of these things have since gone on to be fixed in other SMP series, which we'll touch on at the end. But the Dream SMP is still a form of pseudo-new media, so a lot of these mistakes first had to be made before they could ever be corrected. When I began outlining this very script, I found myself repeatedly referring to one character in particular. I'm going to mention Philza a lot in this video, not because he has the worst or most problems when it comes to the Dream SMP storytelling, but rather because the ones he does have are generally reasonable and especially justifiable. Much like my criticism of the story itself, this isn't intended as a slight against either the character or the creator, but rather as an analysis of both the faults with this character and an understanding of why that didn't impact his popularity with the fandom much at all. Before we go any further, we need to be on the same page when it comes to the meanings of canon versus fanon. Canon is the term for what a work explicitly supports as true. If character A eats a chocolate bar in almost every scene they're in, for example, it's reasonable to say that they canonically like chocolate. Fanon, meanwhile, is any fanbase's tendency to extrapolate and come to their own consensus of a work, like that same character A running a Willy Wonka-style factory in their downtime. Fanon ideas can become canon, which tends to happen in creator-oriented works like Dream SMP. A creator will see a fan's idea and like it enough to canonize it to their character or the story. More on that later. But then there's this secret third thing, which I don't know that I've seen so prominently in any other fandom, namely canon, but more forgiving for meta reasons. Let's take Philza Minecraft's parenting as our primary example. Canonically speaking, Philza is kind of a terrible parent. The very first thing he did upon joining the server was kill his own son, then screw off to the Arctic to live with a wanted terrorist for several months. He's not abusive to Wilbur, just absent or otherwise lacking in his life. In fanon, meanwhile, Philza is often seen as kind of a loser of a dad, who's trying his best but not necessarily succeeding. While he may be well-intentioned, he ultimately falls short. It's an extrapolation upon canon that tries to justify the character's behaviors. From this, it's apparent that Philza, in either case, is nowhere near Dad of the Year. This is clearly an intentional aspect of his character, though to what extent he is even conscious of it is sort of left up to the viewer's interpretation.
Yeah, I fucked up, chat. I fucked up. I gotta be a better role model, I think. Oof.
But if we look at the secret third thing that lies between Canon and Fanon, Philza is a good parent who loves both his son and his other various not quite adopted not sons. He does his best and tries really hard and would hopefully maybe never kill his own child. Don't even worry about it. And that seems weird, right? How did we get here? The characters in Dream SMP are sort of half-fictionalized versions of the streamers playing them. Many of the creators make the active choice to play as a villain, antagonist, or other driving force of conflict. This is good for the narrative, but can become noticeable when the likability of the creator starts influencing fan interpretations of the characters. Then you factor in the creators themselves. If you're a fan of Philza the streamer, you might not want to write about a character whose actions are so dissonant from what you like about the creator. This extends to interpersonal relationships as well. Philza and Tommy Innit, as characters, don't actually interact much on the Dream SMP or have an especially strong relationship. Philza and Tommy Innit, the streamers, though, are friends, and fans like seeing them hang out. So suddenly, Philza has another, usually adopted, son in half the fanfics he's in, despite otherwise not having much of a personal attachment to Tommy and Canon. As an extension of this, the second most popular relationship tag for Dream SMP on Archive of Our Own is for 4 people whose association as a group has nothing to do with Canon at all. If you were to add up the amount of time on the server that all 4 of them were in a call together, I would be surprised if it amounted to any more than an hour. The creators indirectly influencing the story can even extend to other series by the same creators being considered fanon or outright made canon. As an example of a weirder one, Keemstar's Minecraft Mondays were a series of tournaments that took place over the span of roughly 14 weeks, and featured a number of streamers that would eventually join the Dream SMP. And while Minecraft Mondays is occasionally mentioned in out-of-character contexts, it also plays an important interpersonal factor as the driving reason for Quackity's enmity towards Technoblade. In turn, this culminates in the attempted execution of Technoblade at the hands of the Butcher army, the fallout of which eventually led to the Doomsday War. So, in whatever small way, something like Minecraft Mondays ends up being narratively important.
After Minecraft Mondays, after what you did to fucking
It's just
Lumberg,
part of the lore.
it's time. Yeah, it's time. Let's
Minecraft
go.
Mondays is definitely part
It
of the
is
lore.
time!
Nothing's more canon than Minecraft Monday.
is part of the lore. I am still
It's
very
100%
sad over that.
part of it.
Even if the literal event did not occur in-universe, a practical equivalent must have filled its role somewhere. Something else that lies firmly in a not quite canon but not quite not context are the various animations by the artist SAD-ist. Her work is to Dream SMP as Disney is to Grimm's fairy tales. While she might not have originated some of the concepts found in her videos, she certainly popularized them. And while they might not be entirely accurate to the source material, they're an impressive adaptation and one most people tend to recognize or acknowledge as canon. Several of the ideas that she presented in her animations were later made canon by the creators themselves. Honestly, there's no end to concepts that were headcanoned or theorized by fans before being made canon by the creators. Philza's wings, Carl Jacobs' identity as a time traveler, even the 3 canon live system that allowed the story to start establishing larger stakes. The choice of medium for the Dream SMP can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because there are inherent difficulties that come with trying to tell a story in a game like Minecraft. If you don't consume fan media, don't watch animatics or look at fan art, or watch Phil's streams in specific, there is no reason to know that Philza canonically has wings. But this design element is a reflection of his heavy use of elytra in the creator's own hardcore worlds, and there just aren't elytra on the Dream SMP for him to use. It's totally understandable, and the fanon-made canon of his wings being mostly destroyed in the L'Manberg explosion is a neat way to tackle it, but it's also more than a little confusing for someone new to the series. While this disconnect between gameplay and narrative, the ludonarrative dissonance, you might say, isn't especially abundant, it does make some of the places where it appears a bit more frustrating. In the Dream SMP setting, most aspects of Minecraft mechanics are considered to be canon to some degree, including death, although the respawning system would make mortal peril otherwise feel a little cheap. The 3 canon lives system began its use as the story began to pick up in both drama and stakes, as when all 3 are lost is a character actually considered dead. Essentially, it establishes the base rule that most players have 3 canon lives to lose, with the caveat that the average in-game death due to fall damage or lava and the like does not count as canon. Instead, a canon life is generally considered lost when its occurrence is intended to affect the plot in some sense, and tends to be a result of the story making a conscious choice to increase the possible danger. The ludonarrative dissonance here comes from the lack of consistency for what ends up being considered canon, and the ambiguity of a given event's repercussions. During the Red Festival, Technoblade shoots a firework crossbow bolt at Tubbo, killing not only him, but also Schlatt and Quackity in the crossfire by accident. Tubbo's death is canon, but not Schlatt or Quackity's. But Schlatt dies of a heart attack with at least a life to spare later anyway, so why isn't his death at the festival canon, or made canon retroactively? If it is, why isn't Quackity's? For that matter, why is Jack Manifold's death during his duel with Technoblade in the Doomsday War considered canon, and not the dozen other players who were likewise killed in battle that day? And that's not to say the free live system is inherently bad or anything, rather that the lack of clarity when it is invoked, along with frequent tongue-in-cheek canon death jokes from the creators, ends up crippling the capability of death as an actual threat. While we're on the subject, I also want to talk about the opposite of ludonarrative dissonance, the lesser-known concept of ludonarrative harmony. By itself, Minecraft largely exists in this space, as in the absence of a straightforward narrative, it constructs its own through the player's actions and the evolution of the world around them. The Dream SMP, through imposing a narrative onto Minecraft, often has to grapple with these concepts of both dissonance and harmony. It does so by adding the suspension of disbelief required for roleplay in the first place, especially because the story is being written around the game and not vice versa. Integrating, playing with, and subverting Minecraft's mechanics are important parts of the storytelling. One can, for instance, canonically teleport across the world using an ender pearl, dig a tunnel through meters of rock to make an escape, or, when Philza gets placed under house arrest, he is given a renamed pair of iron boots to serve as an ankle monitor. While this ankle monitor has no actual ability to restrain him, it adds to the many Calvin Ball-like rules of this roleplay. In this case, the ankle monitor cannot leave the house. That restriction aside, he still has the freedom of Minecraft's mechanics. He can remove the ankle monitor and put it on an armor stand in his house, which doesn't break this new rule. Tubbo, therefore, has to solve the problem while also using Minecraft's mechanics. He puts Curse of Binding on Phil's ankle monitor. An existing Minecraft clause comes into play. An item with Curse of Binding cannot be removed. But, as with most Minecraft armor, it can be broken. And taking advantage of that canonically recognized game logic is how Philza ultimately escapes. Tommy's Exile is another great example of using the game's mechanics to aid storytelling. His hunger bar is constantly low as an indication to the viewers of his decreased appetite and depression. His skin gradually changes as his exile goes on, and his appearance gets worse and worse. On a related note, the ease of creating or altering a Minecraft skin means most characters can have their designs changed without difficulty, as long as they are constrained to a relatively unmodded Minecraft experience. Most characters in the Dream SMP have at least 2 or 3 skins that they use for various occasions, or to signify a change in their character. Some of the ability to imply actions through dialogue and the like is very impressive too, when you think about it. Consider the duel between Quackity and Technoblade, which in Minecraft is basically just 2 block people swinging their arms at each other. Through use of both Techno's dialogue and the alteration to Quackity's skin after the fact, we know exactly what happened in that fight canonically.
I have a pickaxe, and
No,
I'll
you
put
don't.
it through
No, you
your
don't.
teeth.
Imagine the chaos of a 20-plus person Dungeons & Dragons campaign, but without a DM to hold the lore together or to even keep a character's motivation straight. From there, you can understand the problem with these kinds of large SMP roleplay servers. And this affects the streamers more than the viewers. By the nature of Dream SMP as a collaborative thing, some players just don't have the time or energy to keep up with or keep track of others' motivations. Even if they do, there's not necessarily a chance to grapple with it in the story before it bites them in the butt anyway. So it creates a situation where everyone is surprised that a self-proclaimed anarchist, whose one explicit goal is to abolish the government, isn't happy that the response to him helping kill the corrupt president is, well, we'll just get a new president. The entire dilemma is perhaps best summarized by this exchange.
Not a fan of government.
This wither sucks. Why is it like this?
Since when, Phil? When was this a Phil's a
Since I
Minecraft
was
thing?
forced to kill my own son, you idiots! When do you think?
The opposite can be true as well, though, where something that was supposed to be a secret is revealed on a single stream, and thus the whole server ends up aware of it in a meta sense. This can be the result of overeager fans saying more than they're supposed to, but also just the fact that the streamers are friends and they like to watch each other's content. It creates this awkward sort of atmosphere where, unless a character is there to experience something, they don't really feel the influence of a given event, and yet they're somehow aware of it all the same. As a result, the impact of a grand revelation is lessened, and the story might not get the chance to acknowledge it, or do so half-heartedly. The alternative is that something is created entirely off-stream for the sake of the reveal, which seems reductive to the point of streaming in the first place? Owing to how collaborative and wide-spanning it is, the Dream SMP can't be viewed from a singular streamer's perspective. This results in lore that is either constrained to smaller streams and not likely to become well-known among other viewers and players, or large events where everyone is fighting for a moment in the limelight. They do get better at it over time, to an extent, but there's nothing quite like seeing 20-ish people pausing in the middle of a war and cramming themselves into a drug van just so they can watch their president die of a heart attack. Furthermore, some of the streamers are clearly more comfortable role-playing or putting on a persona than others, and this tends to extend to the diversity of character plotlines and motivations. The Dream SMP can be easily interpreted as a bad timeline for its characters because of a constant need for change in story development. As a result, there is not anyone who ends the story better off than when they started. It's very soap opera in that way, and while the stakes need to continue rising to serve the narrative, it quickly evolves into having nowhere to go. This might be most prominent with Tommy's attachment to his discs, as they were one of the first stakes to be established in the story at all. That doesn't make it any less jarring when, later in the series, he appears to value them equally to the lives of the people he's befriended. And even when you factor in death, major characters of popular streamers aren't going to necessarily plan to lose all their canon lives and leave the server, are they? The success of the server helps them as much as it does their co-creators, so the story has to start dragging in things like the revival book. On top of this, while some scenes are scripted or outlined, a lot of the story is also improvised. Even when it's not, many events are left up to what actually happens on screen, or must account for various real-life interferences. If someone can't stream for a while because they're busy in real life, they just have to write around that, because there's 24 other people that are keeping the story going without them. So now a streamer not only needs to stay personally invested in the server, and have an audience that reflects that, but also coordinate with other streamers for various lore events and interactions. The Dream SMP started, and then took off in popularity, in the wake of the COVID lockdowns of 2020. By the time the story was moving on to the Eggpire arc in 2021, many streamers, and especially viewers, had returned to non-remote forms of work or school. Several major story arcs take only a couple months to occur in real time, if not less than a couple weeks. With the need for something to do on the server, this results in storylines cycling in and out of their own accord, or otherwise being prolonged for meta reasons.
Where your stuff is. I don't know if you want to try and go for it though.
Phil, I'd lose so many streams if we found it, Phil.
Okay, let's not bother then.
The difference between creator and character when it comes to Minecraft YouTube and the fandom becomes incredibly apparent, but also divisive, in the wake of drama. With the public condemnation of a figure comes the awareness of the character whose identity they, in part, share. Without naming names, plenty of fanfictions now openly denounce a character's real-life counterpart. In turn, some people have chosen to stop writing the character altogether. Others edit them out of older stories, replace them with original characters, or delegate them to minor roles within their works. My favorite is the one that replaces a character's name with an all-caps insult, like kids used to do to the Pokemon rival. Either way, there's no right answer here. Plenty of people have also just kept writing that character because the character isn't the creator. If anything, by continuing to depict the character, they make the conscious choice to emphasize the severance between person and persona. Their works are being made explicitly about the character they like and not the creator they condemn. While the Dream SMP did have various writers, both for server-wide storylines and individual character plots, that didn't mean there was a general lore master who could decide things definitively for everyone. Just as there are a variety of fanon concepts made canon, there are also a lot of canon concepts that were retconned at one point or another. Sometimes it was as a result of the story's development, the lore evolving as the series went on, or individual creators not personally agreeing with the implications a different creator had for their character. As an example, Wilbur often referred to Technoblade as his canonical brother, while Techno made an active effort to decanonize the very same thing. As I watched through the Dream SMP story, something I noticed, especially in hindsight, was that as a collaborative effort with no main storyteller, there are a lot of cool big moments that manifest as choices or occurrences that don't really make sense in the long run, and that's because they're usually made for the sake of another character's arc, or for the story arc in general. And this can be especially prevalent because some players were clearly more okay with throwing their own character under the bus to advance the story or cause drama or whatever. That contributes further to those odd half-fanon amalgams of, yes, Philza was a terrible dad who killed his own son, but he kinda had to be for the conclusion of Wilbur's narrative arc, so what if he was like, not? It is also immensely funny to realize that streamer Philza was okay with his character murdering Wilbur, again, his own son, but that he didn't want to betray Techno because that would be too sad. And the disconnect from these big moments results in things like Tommy getting exiled and almost no one visiting him, despite having a variety of on and off friends, because his being abandoned is necessary to facilitate the continuation of his exile arc. Truthfully, I think the culmination of all my criticism thus far is Techno and Philza's reactions to learning the circumstances of Tommy's exile. The amount of fanfiction I've seen about this moment is in the hundreds. It's a fan favorite found family moment, the heartwarming nature of which only serves to contrast the eventual fallout between Tommy and Techno, despite the fact it never actually happened. What does happen, canonically, is that Tommy runs away from Dream's Gaslight Gatekeep Girl Boss arc and hides out in Technoblade's basement for the time being. While the two form a tentative alliance and brief friendship, Tommy's combative nature means he's never really inclined to break down or explain much about his circumstance, and Technoblade isn't that socially or personally invested enough to pry that deeply into it. Now, it's not like the average person really has a natural reason to spill one's own trauma, so that bit is fair enough. But ultimately, Tommy's exile isn't really given a much of a resolution, at least when it comes to his interpersonal relationships. Dream does end up in prison in Pandora's Vault for a time, but for entirely unrelated reasons. And to an extent, I kinda like it. A lot of fans clearly wanted someone to show up and save Tommy from Dream during his exile. The more passive, solo nature of the storytelling, though, meant that rather than have that kind of moment, the crux of the decision was put on Tommy. Tommy is the one who acknowledges that Dream has been manipulating him, and ultimately makes the choice to run away, which is really an important character moment for him. And while it's somewhat annoying, narratively speaking, that Tommy never really explains much to anyone about his exile or has someone confront Dream on his behalf for what happened, it's also pretty realistic. Sometimes trauma is just like that. It is difficult to discuss the story's ending, or lack thereof. The Dream SMP did not culminate in either a bang or a whimper, but yet again a secret third thing. Untapped potential. Perhaps here more than anywhere is something I can't criticize. As frustrating as it is to everyone involved, it's not like much could be done about it. Speaking as someone who has been in a D&D campaign before, and who has also dropped out of that campaign because of misaligned schedules and personal difficulties, the fact is that life happens. People get bored of playing the same game week after week, or have family troubles get in the way, or deal with the flames of friendship fading to lukewarm coals. Technoblade's passing in July of 2022, something I'm otherwise reluctant to bring up amidst a discussion of silly block men and silly block game, marked the end of an era for many fans. Even so, it's also important to note that it is not the cause of the server's decline, but rather a defining moment in its bygone days. Before then, and throughout 2022, the Dream SMP's popularity had already been on the decline. Fewer and fewer creators visited it with any frequency. As the investment in the server waned, the ability to continue telling its story did as well. Where you once had a dozen streamers coming together for major events, the last lore streams of many creators had 4 or 5 people present at most. Several characters and storylines never reached their on-screen resolution, and were instead released as scripts after the fact. Wilbur posted his own imagining of the Wilbur timeline on Archive of Our Own, and openly acknowledges the dubious canonicity of its events. There are still many questions left unanswered, though some of them have been explained by various creators in the years since the server's closure. You can even argue if any of that counts as canon, again, considering the lack of a central storyteller or definitive narrative. The canon ending we did get, by the way, has since been retconned by several of the creators who were unhappy with both it and its implications. I guess that's the final point here. You can't please everyone. In the years since the Dream SMP ended, numerous other SMP series have popped up featuring many of the same creators, though they've yet to reach similar heights. While we're here, though, let's look at a few ways various creators have corrected some of the issues with the Dream SMP's storytelling in its wake. While it's a big investment in terms of cost for the average creator, some people have started using VTuber models for their lore characters. As a couple examples, Rambo has one that they used back when they played MCC. More recently, here's Bad Boy Halos that he uses on occasion. Over on the QSMP, Philza was able to show off his actual wings thanks to the Custom Player Models plugin. Tubbo's newer The Realm SMP features a similar 3 live system to the Dream SMP, but with all deaths being considered canon regardless of their cause. There are, however, ways for characters to increase their number of lives in return. Both QSMP and The Realm tend to more heavily gamify the roleplay and introduce new mechanics and systems, presumably to help alleviate some of the problems discussed in this video. Considering how long it took me to get into Dream SMP in the first place, I look forward to watching any of those series sometime between 2050 and the heat death of the universe. Subscribe to Technoblade.